first I want to thank everyone that's here. Thank you for taking the time. Also, some images. This is just a disclaimer. Some images during this presentation that I'll be showing are only for demonstration purposes. Yes, my name is Ana Sequeira. I'm a front-end engineer at Philip Morris. I was actually from a integration background, and actually migrated to front-end. This is because I feel like a lot of the interfaces don't get, a lot of the websites that we use, mobile applications, don't get a UI that is as good as it should be. Like, we all encountered forms that we tried to submit and there was some error and we could not find what was the problem. You know, these kind of issues really can be solved if we pay attention to little details, and that really has to do with user experience and accessibility. The first part of this workshop will be a bit theoretical, but then we can get practical, so it will be more interesting, more participative. And to begin with, I'll just explain what are these concepts really. What is UX? What is accessibility? Why should we care about these? And then here on the demo, we can get a bit more practical. So that part will be more fun. I'll try to not go too exhaustive in this theoretical part. So let's go. Okay, so let's start with these concepts. You probably heard about UX, user experience, but there's also another concept that usually goes together with UX, which is UX UI, which is the design part. And we also have the accessibility concept here, which we'll get through. But first, so what is UX? Really, it's every time you use a product, it's every time you interact with some interface. It can be a mobile app, it can be a website, but really it can be anything. And this experience can be a good experience or a bad experience, right? Here, there are two aspects of it. So you have the experience, which is the process of interacting. So you have a certain goal when you use a product. Can you reach that goal easily, or is it hard? That's the part of UX. But we also have the UI, the design, the user interface. Now this part is typically, it is related, because if something is aesthetically pleasing, an interface, then of course it also provides a better user experience, but sometimes they can mismatch if they are not well synchronized. So what happens here is really that if you have an interface that's really beautiful, but it doesn't work for you, it doesn't let you do what you want. Imagine you are searching for movies, but you only want movies in the language you speak, for example. You only want like Italian movies, and you want to filter by Italian language, but you can't. The application looks beautiful, but you can't do what you want. So, you know, that's the difference between design and UX. Sometimes something can be beautiful, but UI, having a good UI, is not only beautiful, it's also easy to use, intuitive, right? That's the difference here. I have this image. You probably have seen this image on the internet at some point. It's a perfect reflection of what I just said. The design sometimes can look good, but it's not aligned with the experience, and it doesn't work very well if that happens. So we can now look at this concept of accessibility. We went through UI UX. Accessibility is something different, but it has to do with user experience. It's part of the experience. This because what accessibility is try to make the application usable by as many people as possible, regardless of their disabilities or their conditions, really, because sometimes we have a slow internet connection because we are at a cafe. You know, it can be also something like that. It also benefits the user experience for everyone, really, if you have accessibility into consideration. Sometimes you will see that it's often mentioned as A11Y. You can kind of read this as LI. which really reflects the idea that UX needs to be an ally to people with all types of disabilities. And why do we need this really? So we understand what accessibility is, but maybe we are not aware of the numbers, how many people with disabilities actually are there. And we have here from World Health Organization that it's quite a big number, actually. 285 million people have some degree of visual impairment, and 466 million have some degree of hearing loss. So this should be reason enough, but this is a cultural reason, but we also have other reasons like the law and policies. Here, I'm not going to go deep into any of these. There are some laws, there are some policies. You only need to know that they exist. And if you want to be compliant, with the law, it's in your best interest to really be aware of these. And you don't need to be a developer. If you participate in a project where they're developing a product that will have interface, you can always give input. Okay, but what about accessibility? Are we being compliant? It doesn't have to be for only developers. This is good for everyone to know. Also, a little detail here, you have 3 levels of conformance. So something can be A, AA, or AAA. So this is a classification from A is it's accessible, but not the best level. And the 3 A's are your application is super accessible. Yeah. So really, we need to be aware what type of impairments are out there so we can prepare for them. We have visual impairments. So visual is not only blind people, it can be low vision, so a degree of blindness that can be profound or mild, but also color blindness, for example. When it comes to hearing, again, it's kind of the same thing. Your hearing can be profound, or you can have an impairment that is profound or just mild, just a little hard of hearing, but not too much. Mobility really has to do with you can have an accident, for example, but also you can have just difficulty doing exact movements with the mouse or using the keyboard or using a phone. So these can be a bunch of health problems, neurological, genetic. It can also be again from an accident. Cognitive impairments. This is it can be connected to mental illness, but I think really we all benefit from when accessibility cares about cognitive impairments, because it can be from something like not having trouble remembering. And for example, the alarms, the reminders, they are actually there for cognitive, like related to cognitive impairment, but we all benefit from alarms. We all put a clock to wake up in the morning. Sometimes we have an alarm to take some medication. So it benefits everyone really. And you also have this here, temporary, permanent, situational. This is just to say that when you have an impairment, when you have an impairment, that's not correct. This can be something that is temporary. So you could have a health issue that can be completely cured, but you can also have a permanent health problem. And also you can have situational, like you are on the train and you forgot your headphones and you want to see a video, but if you have the audio, it will bother other people, so you will only read the captions. So it's a situation. You can prepare applications for these. For example, as I said, with the captions. So these are examples of what people that have impairments typically use. And I'll have more examples in the next slide. But just to give you a little overview, the reminder alarms are connected to cognitive. Closed captioning, this can be for someone with hearing loss, but it also can be just for someone who wants to not have the audio on. You have the switch. This switch is for mobility. So it's when someone can't use the mouse, for example, they can use this switch that goes over the options. Also, there's screen readers. This is a software that really relies on a good website that is prepared to use it as well. So we can make the experience better for screen readers. And of course, this is for people with visual impairments. AAC devices, you probably didn't hear about this one. This is augmented and alternative communication, and is also for, it can be for mobility or cognitive or for speech limitations, because sometimes when you have mobility issues, you just prefer to give orders to your computer with the speech, with talking. But if you also have speech limitations, there's also other devices like this. So this is really, don't get scared, too many icons on the screen, but this is just the example of everything that is out there. So we really have screen readers for people with visual impairments. These screen readers, everyone knows this, because they come with Windows, they come with Apple, they come with Android. All operative systems usually have this thing called a narrator, that's the screen reader. But you also have applications that you can buy or install from Google Play, for example, that will have a screen reader feature. And you can also have speech to text. If you go on Google Play, for example, you find a bunch of speech to text options. Usually the Google search bar also have a speech to text already there. You don't need to install anything. And there's specific tools, like you can have a software that has an avatar that translates every audio into sign language. So that also exists. This is just to tell you that there's all these things out there that people already dedicated time to create. And I think that's really inspiring, actually. Here, there's also tools for the developers. So when you make your application, you can run an evaluation tool, and that tool will tell you what are the accessibility problems that your site has or not. And that's also the same for the color contrast. You can run your application through a color contrast checker, and it will let you know if your contrast ratio is okay or not. There's also companies that can do an audit for your accessibility. So you can have a company audit your product and let you know how much accessibility you have. So I'll just go over some key points that we need to think about really if we make some product with an interface. But these are simple, and these are more like for when we are designing or planning the application. So that's really, we have to remember that we should have more than one format. So if we have a video, we should provide captions, transcript. We should have maybe a text option, a text-to-speech option if there's an input to give. We should consider to have more than one format on our product, on our website, mobile app. The plain language is really because you want the user to understand your application and use it easily. So there's no point in complicating things too much. So you should just use plain language. Focus on the most important content. So remove unnecessary images, unnecessary advertisement, animation. Sometimes the website is only animations, and we want to buy something or do something, and we don't understand how we can do that because there are too many things in the way. So that's just some key things to avoid. Keep the layout consistent. So make everything look the same when it comes to the layout structure and the navigation. There is psychology behind all of these things. Those are called the laws of UX. I'll not get into that because it's another world. But there is also laws of studies that lead us to conclusions. Those are the laws of UX. And you can also look into that if you're curious. For example, Hicks' law will tell you that you should have less options so the user can decide faster, and it's easier for the user to decide compared to having many options. So you should keep the menus not too long. Oh, sorry. Another 3 key points is, again, what I just said, it sort of relates to this. If you are doing, for example, buying something online, if you have your steps broken down into some smaller steps, like first I just review the cart, I apply a promotion code, Then I just check out and I get my address information, and then I get the payment. So it's a complex process divided into small steps, and that makes the user stay in the page. If we had a really long web page with all the products, maybe we would be overwhelmed and we would drop out and not do this purchase. Again, for forms, we usually have forms for our address when we buy something. The form needs to be easy, and it should have, if you make an error, it should help you understand exactly what the error is and how to recover from it. It should not be a blocker, and sometimes we know that it is. Sometimes with our phone number or with our postal code, we get blocked and we can't complete the form. Again, this is another familiar element, is another law backed by psychology. Pretty much our brain works better when we already know the elements, so we should try and make things familiar. So this was the design aspect of it, and now I'm going to get a bit technical, but not too much, don't get scared. How, as developers, what we need to really do to make something more accessible. So when we are building an application, what is different from programming without caring about accessibility versus caring about it? So it's actually very few small differences. It's the same code almost. I would say the difference is like 1% to 2%. So let's actually look what are those differences. So if we have images, we should have alt text. So it's this alt girl in a jacket here. This alt text is to replace the image. So if you have someone who can't see, they will only hear by the screen reader girl in a jacket. So in this case, we should explain just what the image is. Don't make long texts. Don't write image.png because that's not, the person hearing will not understand what that is. And that's pretty much it. Just keep images with alt. And other media, you can also add these alt. This is also, I think, self-explanatory, because what is easier for you to see? What text, the upper text or the bottom text? Right, it's the bottom text because it has a higher contrast. And we have to remember some people will have low vision, and even for everyone, if we have a text like this, that's very thin, we will be doing a higher eye effort, a bigger high strain. So because of that, that's not really good, because it can lead us to have vision problems in the future. And it's clearly better to have a good contrast ratio. It will not be as heavy on the user. This is because, so something else you need to consider when developing, and this is the extra code. This is just because when you have, for example, a form, and then you wrote everything, and maybe you press enter because you want to submit the form. The thing is that that has to be programmed. That has to be in the, it has to be a feature. And if it's not, that enter will just not work, and you have to use the mouse. And as we saw before, some people will not be using the mouse. Some people only use the keyboard. Some people will be using speech to text and all of that. So we don't want to only have one option. We want to have as many options as possible. So we want to have the keyboard always accessible. That's why we need this extra code that catches if we pressed enter, for example. We also, if we have videos, again, I already mentioned this. These are more specific information. So this is from YouTube. If you look at the right, you have a transcript right there. So, and you also have the captions on. This to say that if you have a video, you should have as much information as possible. So you should have captions, transcript. You can have a description of what's happening if the video is not narrated. It's only video, but there's no voice explaining what's happening. You might want to have, in that case, a description. I think if you watch TV with the captions, you probably saw these already. Those moments where it says playing music or dancing to music, because nobody is talking, but something is happening, and there's that explanation of what's happening. Something else we need to consider, this is because of the screen readers. It's only because the screen reader will read the links, and the links will be something like about, and it doesn't really tell the user using the screen reader what it is about. So we should have more concrete links. I know an example like this is, for example, if you go to Adidas website and you go for shoes, women shoes, you will see that once you click on shoes for women, you'll see that the URL is /women shoes. It's very concrete. It's not just I don't know, shop. It's not something like that. It's something way more specific. So the person using the screen reader can understand what exactly that page will be about. Something else, again, this is also because of the screen reader, is that you should not use divs for everything. I don't know who here has been learning HTML or uses HTML already. There's something that happens is that many people just tends to use divs for everything, but you should actually try and use the proper HTML tags. So because these are recognized by the browser, they are recognized by the screen readers, and if you can use these, the screen reader catches easier what is a title, what is a footer, what is a banner, what is the navigation bar. So it really helps. Something else is that sometimes having a good HTML is not enough. And in that case, we need to use this thing called ARIA. ARIA roles, states, and properties. Again, this is very profound, and I'm not going to get into this very specifically. I will just tell you that these ARIA roles are to provide more context to the screen reader, and I'm going to show you how and why. For example, when we have, for example, checkboxes or a combo box, or we can have a table, we can have a timer. If we have only divs for these, the screen reader will not immediately understand, for example, if a menu is expanded, if a button is working as a tab, if the timer is counting. But we can add all of this information in using ARIA. So this is how we actually develop for accessibility. So everything is self-explanatory, and we add the things that are missing. So something is missing, we add information. That can be a state or a property or a role. The roles are these things, all of these things you see here, they are roles. So I can say this div is acting as a radio group. This div is acting as a banner, for example. We are almost at the end of the theoretical part. Something else for screen readers is that you should either avoid tables, or you should, if you really have to use HTML tables, you should make sure you have headers for everything, because the screen readers tend to have problems with HTML tables. If you don't use tables, you can just use the CSS grid, and that works perfectly for the screen reader. It's just if it's a table, it messes up a little bit because of the flow. The screen reader tries to match the flow, so maybe it will read the column every time or the row every time. Also, something else that is important for the screen reader, because of the language, of course, should be identifiable. What's the language, and you do that with just this lang equals and then the language code. And again, sometimes we have a page in English that at some point has a French quote. For example, you need to identify that the French quote is in a different language, so the screen reader can maybe switch or translate it instead of just reading it badly with the bad accent, for example. Something else, again, we kind of already saw this, but it really makes a difference if we can specify where the errors are in forms and how can we fix them. Because if we don't have any information, or everything is at the top, and usually when you submit you are at the bottom and you don't see that error up there, for example, it's good to really think about the forms. And again, responsive, you probably heard about this already. We have to make code that will adjust our design to different screen sizes. we should avoid having situations where the text just cannot be read because it comes out of the screen. And to end this topic, captchas are bad overall. You probably have seen the checkbox, I'm not a robot, or this thing here. This is really to tell humans and robots apart. But it's really not very good for accessibility. So it should be used only when the security check is really needed. And if it's used, if it has to be used, it should have audio option, maybe images, challenge option, or maybe, again, text option. There should be many formats, so it makes it easier for the user. And also, placeholder. So placeholder is usually a gray text that is inside these inputs. The problem with placeholders is that if you are using a screen reader, they do not translate. For example, they are not read by a screen reader. Sometimes they are pre-filled, so sometimes the placeholder is counting as a value, and if you press enter, you may not notice it, and it can have a wrong information. So it's better not to use it overall. It's better if you can use just a sentence on the top of the input, or an explanation with the example of how it should be. If you really have to give some suggestion, that should be it. And we should avoid placeholders when we can. So yeah, let's get to testing. I will be sharing these on the chat. So let me stop sharing for a second. I'll share again. I'll share a link with you. Okay. It's in the chat, and I'll be sharing the presentation again now. Tell me if you can open it, if it's all okay. You can make just a thumbs up on Teams or write in the chat. Okay. So I'm going to actually open it. Yeah. So you should be seeing this. I'll just take it out of the way so you can see the questions. Here you only have to really see if you can find the language. The way you do this, okay, it's you either press F12 or you click inspect. Can you do it and tell me what the language is? If you can't, I will be showing how to do it. So I'll give maybe just a few seconds, a minute. So I'll write in the chat what you have to do, or inspect with the right click. You need to either press F12 or make a right click. Okay, I'll just. Okay. If you can find the language code, you can write it in the chat. And we also have, let me see. Okay, I think I can show it. So let me go there again. Okay, so here what we do is we do inspect like this. Okay, and it will open this window. Usually it is right here. Okay, and you will see that the length is ANUS. Very, yeah, that's correct, Anna. That's exactly it. So you can see this is identified, and now the screen reader knows what language to translate to or to speak. And also something else. Let me go back to the presentation. Okay. Does it match the language being used on the website? We could see that, yes, it was English. So now I'm going to be sharing another link. And the challenge is to find out the background color and the text color. Okay, I'll be sharing this link right here. This is a color contrast checker. You want to place here the text color and here the background color. So if we go back to our website here, we can see that it seems like for text we have black and for background we have white. So I don't know if that works when you write here. I don't think you can write black, for example. Yeah, I think you need to write the color code. You also do have these radios here, but for black is 000, and for white is FFF. And here we have, if you now scroll down, you can see that we have a really good contrast ratio, 21:1, and all the tests pass. And here we have the 3 A's. So this is really good contrast, okay? So we can go back to our presentation. Like we can do a thing that you can do some tests here, some playing. So let's see, red with bright red. Oh, I think this is no surprise. There's no contrast where we are using the same color. So all the tests fail. But for example, if I go maybe to white, a little bit passes because there's a better contrast, but it's also not a very good combination. If you go here to, I think it's like a dark red or something, then the tests pass because the contrast is enough. Let me just return to the presentation. Okay, so we tested for the contrast and we saw if we could find the language for the screen reader. And something else that we can do, for example, is to check if the links have a descriptive title. So when we have a link, an anchor tags are for links, we usually add, we can add the title. This title is for the screen reader to know what this link does. And we can check that as well. So if we go back here to the first link I shared, we can click here. So this is a pointer, then we click on something that is a link, for example here, and it will place us right in the place where the link is on the code. So we can see this a bit bigger. So this is the title. Age 57, using language attributes on the HTML element. So if we click here, that's exactly what we have. So the link is pretty accurate, I would say. It describes very well what that page will be about. So this is what I mentioned before. Remember when I was mentioning all the rules? This is the demonstration of them. Here it says a yes, it describes exactly, and what we already saw what the title was. But the title should be really to just describe the page. You don't need to add a long text, and you should not add a long text. And it should also not be too short because it may be too lacking on information. Okay, so this is another exercise we will be doing. I'll give you the links as well. Here what we have is a bad example and a good example. Let me share you the bad example first. If you click on that website, you'll be seeing something like this. Okay. Here we have a bad example, and this website is already from the W3 consortium, so it's already an explanation of what is bad. We can see that we have 10 problems. So now, if you remember, I mentioned before we had tools to evaluate accessibility, right? And this is a tool that you can install on your browser. It's just an extension, it's free. It's called Wave, just like this, Wave. And once you install it, you don't need to do it right now, but it will give you a summary of the problems that the page has. So it has 37 errors, 2 contrast errors, and we can see here the details. For example, images with no alt text, linked image missing alternative text, this is the alt text. language is missing, low contrast, and this helps us fix our application one by one, like error by error, warning by warning. And in the end, we have an application that is so much more ready for a screen reader. So we can see the good example now. Okay, and if I run the same application, again, even if you don't have the wave, you can later on these links check what it says for each error. They will tell you how to fix it, what's the problem, what exactly guideline it violates. So it's very informative. So if I run my tool again, I can see 0 errors, 0 contrast errors. Okay, the page, by the way, the page is only what is below. Okay, here it has a bad and good example, so it's more, consider more here the city lights. That's the site they are using as an example. So you also have the same errors as before, but now they are fixed, they are corrected. So if we go back here, how many accessibility issues does the bad example have? Can you tell me? Can you, someone write on the chat? We just saw it, but I don't remember the exact number. But we can see these kind of things by using the extensions, or without the extension in this case, because we had an example for it. But usually we have to use some tool. And we saw that for the good example, the problems were just not there. Everything was okay. So before, I'll give you a link, and this one everyone will have to click on and participate. And it's fully anonymous, but before I give you this link where you'll be testing an application, actually, I'll just tell you what is this about. So we were checking only for accessibility. We were thinking about screen readers just now and about low vision, contracts. This was all accessibility. So now to finish, we'll talk a little bit about user experience. So you can also measure that. So if you want to know if your application has good user experience or bad user experience, if you want to know what's the state of your application when it comes to user experience, because it's really a make it or break it aspect. Your users will stay or not stay, depending on that. So these are some metrics you can measure. Again, this is only for measuring and improving, like success rate, completion time, error rate, retention is like, is your user coming back to the app? Conversion rate can be really your goal. So this changes from application to application, but it can be, I want my users to subscribe to my newsletter, for example, and that will be your conversion rate. Or I want my users to buy something. That's another conversion rate. So for these, for the user experience, you usually use prototypes. We make the screens, all the screens, and 0 code. And with this tool, Figma, it's one of the tools that you can use to do the prototypes. And then you can use this tool to test them as if you were using the real app, but the UX metrics, the metrics are being collected behind. So the time is being collected, the success, the error, the retention, you know, all these things are being collected in the background. And that's what we are going to use for these tests. We will measure the user experience of this app called Magic Coffee. So this application on Figma, these wireframes made with Figma, you can already simulate an application here, like a real application. I can show you a little bit, but not too much, because then your test is influenced by it. So here it will work as the application was coded and ready to go, but it's a simulation. Okay, so we could go on as if we were using it. Of course, it skips the phone verification and all of that. So I don't want to do that here because I have another test. So I'll give you this link now, and I want you to not think that you are being tested, because you are not. What you are testing here is the user experience of this application. Is this application easy to use? Can you really do what you want, or do you struggle? So there's really no bias intended. You don't need to worry. It's all about the application and the experience you get from it. So I'll share this link now in the chat, and I'll give you a few minutes. This time I'll really give you a few minutes because it takes maybe, I don't know, 3 minutes. And all you have to do is really press next. You'll have a task and you'll press next and you'll try to do that task. And you can even abandon the task if you think the task is hard or you can't easily understand how to do it. That's all okay. So I'll give you a minute to do this task. And I'll ask you soon if you finished, or I'll just see if we have some results from it. Because that's what I really want to show you. That's the fun part. Tell me if you are having any issues with the link that I gave you. Is all okay? Can you see the screen? Are you getting tasks? Just give me a like in the chat, for example. Okay, thank you, Ana. I just noticed there are many Annas here. I'm Ana. I see other 2 Annas. If anybody finishes, let me know. Okay. If everyone is maybe done or nearly done, let me know. If not, I will check the results soon. Let me just check. Okay, I think I can start showing some of the results I have here. So here in Maze, we can look at these results and see what metrics we have. And this helps us improve an application or see where the problem is. So I can see here 5 responses. I can see there was a problem here and direct success, or I mean, it was still successful, but maybe it takes longer, for example. We can see average duration, misclick rate. And for example, if I'm a designer that wants to improve these values, I want the time to be shorter, right? So maybe I'll do changes in the UI and I'll see if I test again with users, if the time goes down, for example, if I think the task is being too long and that's being, you know, a hindrance to the users. Again, we can get these types of information question by question. We also have, for example, here a full report that Maze provides us, and yeah, we can see like a summary of everything, overall rank of a usability score. You can see here. So we get more information, 5%, we get percentages for each screen, each click. we should get also, I think, heat maps. Have you heard about it? So heat maps will show where the mouse was, where it was clicking. So we can get very detailed information, really. So this is pretty much it for the presentation. I hope you had fun with the testing. So I want you to make me questions now. We reach the QA. Also suggestions, comments, anything really. It can even be outside of the scope. Just let me know. Anything you want, you can just make a question. Here in Teams, we usually raise our hand when there's a lot of people, but I'll raise my hand as example. Yeah, like this. Or you can just talk, or you can just write in the chat. If you prefer to write in the chat, that's also okay. Let me
I think that we have so small group, so we can ask questions, unmute ourselves and ask.
Yeah, you just talk. But it's also okay to write in the chat. I like to do the two options. For the people who are more shy, they don't have to speak. They can write in the chat as well. Yeah.
Exactly. So Anna, I want to ask about this last tool. It is available for free, or how we can use it for checking our sites?
Yeah, I know I blazed through. No, let me speak. I blazed through these slides, and it was sort of on purpose because I wanted to give time for the QA and the exercise on itself. But both of these tools are free. But for example, Figma is free for 3 projects, and then you have to start paying. Maze is free, but if you want to customize that welcome message or the thank you message, you have to also pay. You can use them for free, but if you want to do more, at some point it might become more worth it to get the paid version. But you can use it free, just ready to go. And it's also, they are both collaborative, so you can invite people, you can put their emails and invite them, and they can work with you, for example, on the wireframes. Yeah, that's it. You also have a large community, especially for Figma. I can also show that. Let me just read the next question, and maybe I'll show you a little bit about Figma, because I think it's the most fun tool.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question, Anna. What size of first, second, and third class fonts are the best for apps? And which size is the best for a website? Okay, there are some rules about this, yes. If you have headers, H1, H2, H3, you should not jump from H1 to H4, for example, or H2 to H5. You should keep hierarchy. So if you have a bigger title, that's H1, but then if you have a subtitle from that one, you should go with H2. You should respect these numbers order, because then the screen reader will also perceive that as, okay, this is a subtitle, this is a subtitle, and so on. Tell me if that was your question. When it comes to the size, again, you can use headers, or you can use a size that is a CSS unit that will actually scale, and that will make the application more responsive instead of using a fixed pixel number. Oh, okay. Pixels at Figma. So in Figma, you only have pixels option, sadly, but in code, you do have more than that. Let me actually show. So here, if we go design mode, yes, and then, for example, something else, like here, text. Here we will see that we only have Why am I not? I'll select. Okay. Here you only have really the pixels. You can't really add units. So it will not be so easily scalable with Figma because there are plugins that you can install to make it scalable, but Figma is image. It's only a screen, so it's not so easy to make it scalable here. But when you translate to code, instead of using pixels, you can actually use other CSS units, and if you do that, you can have it scalable. For example, that's true for percentages. But there's also other units that you can use that are very useful for scaling and for zoom in and that kind of situation. I would recommend AM personally, or RAM. So when RAM is 16 pixels, so it knows how to scale with screen size, zoom, everything really. Any other question? Let me actually show you. Well, nobody asks a question. I'll just very fast show you. Wait. I'm trying to zoom out and I can't. Okay. So this is how you do the screens one by one, and then you here on prototype, you do the connections as you can see them now, these blue arrows. And that's it. It's not difficult at all. That's how you do a prototype, and then you can just click on here and you'll test it just like you tested in this link that I gave you. But here, no metrics are collected. It's just for you. Yeah. It's a very useful tool, and you can invite and have, I think, up to 10 people working at the same time in this program. You can have everyone collaborating in real time, and you'll see there. You see Ana here with a bubble, purple bubble. You will see also everyone's bubble because of their cursor, their mouse. Yeah, it's a very good tool for teams. Sometimes it's used for everything. You can have a meeting where you're writing your goals, and everyone can use it. If you have a meeting like a retrospective, that's a meeting where everyone gives feedback, you can have that, and everyone can use it at the same time. It's a very fun tool, and it's not super easy to learn, but it's easy to learn overall. Any more questions? If there aren't any more questions, I think we can stop recording.